Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today we are back with Grant Chapman. You might remember he has this super cool square body Chevy stepside. Well, he's kind of downsized his rig a little bit. Now he's got this Jeepster Commando that he's built, and we're going to learn all about it today. So Grant, what was your inspiration to build a new rig? Were there things you didn't like about your Chevy, or was it just time to move on? You still have the Chevy, right?
I still have the Chevy, and okay. I've had some questions. People are like, are you going to sell it? And probably not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
But no, it was just, you know, me and my wife talked about having kids soon, and so it's like, well, the truck's only a 2-seater, so you need a 4-seater. So I kind of sparked, you know, the looking for another rig. And I actually, before this one, I was driving, my neighbor had a Scout 2 for sale for like $1,000 or $2,000. And I was like, this is it, I'm gonna build the Scout. And so I bought the Scout, and basically we went to the Rubicon that summer, and my wife saw somebody with a Jeepster, and she's like, I like that one better. And so I was like, okay, I'll go find one of those. So
happy wife, happy life.
That's how I kind of led into it.
And where did you find this?
So actually, one of my friends, it was his brother's originally. The story is like kind of like it's mixed. He sold it to somebody. He knew of it on a farm in I think it was in somewhere in California. So he's like, hey, I know of a Jeepster for pretty cheap, just the body. And so I was like, I'm in. And it was $800, and
nice.
Picked it up and drove it home.
The purchase price is the cheapest part of the whole build, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, $800 that'll never happen again.
Well, and on this thing, you've got the frame is custom, the suspension is custom. You do that all at your shop, CNA Fabrication, right?
Yeah, so I built everything kind of like from scratch. And like this rig, when I was building it, it was just the body, right? The frame was kind of like, it was infested with rat's nests. It was just so bad, rusted out. The frame was cracked. So I was like, you know what? This will be my opportunity. I'm gonna build something from the ground up. And so I started, frame, suspension, engine is all new. So it's everything from the ground up I've touched.
And you're an engineer. Do you have files for all this stuff then? I mean, in this day and age, there's other people with Jeepsters, and I imagine everyone out there has frame issues and rust issues.
Yeah, so that was also the goal, is like, if I make it once, I should be able to make it again. So I do everything in CAD and have it all the files saved. So making new stuff and making multiples of this is pretty easy.
And you have a laser over there now too, right?
Yep, we decided to buy an older laser CNC, and it is just awesome having that. Like, compared to, we had a plasma table before, and it really wasn't bad. It was a huge like step in the right direction, but having a laser, you just pull it off the table and it's done. You're like, oh, okay, no cleaning. So
right.
It's pretty epic.
Nice. So how long was this build from where you pull it out of this farm and a field to now?
I think it was probably going on like 3 years. And like the first year and a half, I really just dragged it home, and it sat on the trailer, sat in my backyard. I did some tinkering. We were actually building a different Jeepster, so that's kind of where the frame came from too. I was like, oh, I can kind of build a prototype frame on this rig. So I built that first frame for that rig, and we used my Jeepster as a mock-up. So it was in the shop, it was at my house, then in the shop, and then it just kind of got tucked into a corner and sat for like 1.5 years, and really started building it probably, like last year, started buckling down and really getting it done.
And I think that's always tough, right? When you have a shop, then you're busy, customers' rigs take the priority. When you're tired, you don't really want to do work.
Oh yeah, when you're like, well, I got to do work for other people instead of doing my fun stuff. So I got to make money to live, but I also want to build my own rig. So there's a lot of that.
Sure. Well, I can see your rig is on 40-inch Nitto trail grapplers on Battleborn beadlock wheels. This video is actually brought to you by Nitto. If you like what we're doing here, please like, and don't forget to subscribe to the Driving Line channel. That way you won't miss out on any content in the future. So Grant, walk us through the specs. Like, what's the drivetrain that's in this thing? It sounded pretty rowdy when you pulled up.
Yeah, so it's all junkyard stuff. So I had pulled a 5.3 out of like a Sacramento junkyard. It was just bone stock. I went through it, did gaskets and whatnot, oil pump, some of the stuff that you should do while you have the motor out of the car. Then it's a 4L80, again, got it from the junkyard. It's like $100, like you can't beat that. So I bought that. Then a transfer case 241 out of the junkyard also. And then we're running 99-04 Super Duty Dana 60 from Facebook for like 400 bucks. And then the rear axle is 14 bolt from the Junkyard also.
So you mentioned the 99-04 Super Duty axle. I hear a lot of guys love the 05 up, bigger ball joints, bigger brakes. What made you go with this axle? Was it just price?
It was price, and like, so when I was looking at it, it was like, okay, I could go to the 05, but people wanted somewhere like $1,000, at least where I was looking at. Maybe I was looking in the wrong spot. But like, this deal came up on Facebook, and I thought 400 bucks, whatever. If I trash the axle and it explodes at some point, I can always replace it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now you mentioned a 14 bolt in the back. Those have an 8 on 6.5 bolt pattern versus the metric bolt pattern that's on the Super Duty axle. So what bolt pattern are these Battleborn beadlocks?
It's all 8 by 6.5. I'm a Chevy guy at heart. So
okay.
I just made a little with the laser table that we have. I made a drill template so you can drill the unit bearings and the rotors for 8 by 6.5, and it works surprisingly. It's super easy to do. So
just on like a drill press then?
Yeah, just on a drill press. You just line it up, fits over the 8 by 170 studs, and it locates it's a 39 by 64 drill bit.
Okay.
To drill all the holes.
Is that a part you sell then through C&A Fabrication?
Yep. So if you need it,
good to know. All right, nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that this has a 4L80 in it, automatic transmission, and as I recall, your step side has an MB4500 in it, right, with dual transfer cases. So how does that differ as far as having an automatic versus a manual and gearing? I'm still learning. So if you see me drive it, you'll see me kind of bumping along. I'm trying to 2-foot the brake and the gas to kind of keep it from rolling places. So like, it's definitely a learning curve. It's convenient though. There's no clutching. It's pretty awesome just kind of driving through stuff. But I got it on my Chevy, the 4500 and the doubler, the low first gear. I missed that because you just let the clutch out and it crawls over stuff. So this 241, I always knew that at some point I was going to probably throw an Atlas in it or do some kind of doubler, like a 4205 with an Eco Box or something like that. But the 241, it's just not quite deep enough. Okay. And that 4L80 has like a 2.5 to 1 first gear. So it's pretty steep right off the get-go. Right, because those are basically like a turbo 400 with an overdrive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is the converter stock? Is it looser than stock?
Yes, and if anybody is going to do this again, if I was to do this again, I would change the converter. Somebody told me to, when I was like, hey, I'm going to run a 4L80, they're like, change the stock converter. I didn't listen to them. I ran the stock converter because I figured it's behind a 2500. It's pretty heavy. It should dissipate the heat pretty well. But after I put the cam in the truck, it's like it just doesn't line up right.
As far as the power band of the engine now and like where that torque converter hooks up?
Absolutely. And it's not bad. It just kind of feels lazy off the bottom end.
Okay.
It's not as snappy as you'd expect.
And tell us about the suspension that you're running under here.
So this one, it's we have 2.5 by 14s all the way around rad flows with 2-inch by 4-inch rad flow bumps on it. They're limited down to 2 inches right now. But if I get a little bit more ride height, I can kind of always increase it a little bit.
Okay. What sort of spring rates are you running, and how did you determine that on a new rig?
Spring rates, I ended up at, in the front it's 200 over 200, the rear is 200 over 225, and it was by sheer luck that I got those. I kind of had a ballpark. I asked some friends what I should expect, but I had a friend with some spare coils, and I thought, hey, what better way to set it up? So I threw the coils on. It sat pretty high at first, but then as I, let it sit, it just kept like settling lower and lower, and like it probably should go up maybe an inch or so, but right now it's sitting super low, pretty gangster. So it's kind of cool.
It looks cool, that's for sure. So if I recall correctly, your step side, you had just linked in the front when we shot it, but it was still leaf springs in the back. And this is linked front and rear, right?
Yeah, this is linked front and rear. It's a 3-link in the front with a 4-link in the rear. The 3-link, the track bar is actually behind the axle.
Oh,
I was like trying to package it, and it just seemed to make sense in the back. So if you see it, you'll be like, what? But it works. So.
And that's a function of like the sump, where the sump is?
Yeah, it's literally, it dips under, it's like under the axle, over the belt, or over the housing of the back of the axle. So
okay,
you'll have to take a look. It's hidden in there. It's hard to see. But yeah, no, 4-link in the rear, triangulated, and yeah, just standard 3-link in the front.
Okay. And are the shocks mounted on the links in the back, or are they on the axle housing?
Everything's mounted to the axle housing, and I really thought about doing trailing arms in the rear. The wheelbase I could probably get it, but it doesn't seem quite long enough. And if I put the trailing arms, I put the shocks on the links, it would have been right in the rear passenger compartment. So you could potentially put your hands in there, which is a little dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want your kiddos
exactly.
reaching into a coilover.
I figured I'll put it on the axle, and it still does pretty well.
Yeah, nice. I really like Jeepsters. They're a little different than, you know, your CJs and stuff. I like the wheelbase, I think is great. They look cool. There's not a lot of aftermarket products for them though. So what did you do for like tube fenders? I really like the mini boat sides you've got there and the rear fenders.
Yeah, so I pretty much built everything you see on this rig. And even if there was something that was like link mounts and stuff like that, I'm pretty stubborn. I just decided I'm gonna make it myself. You know, you could buy it, it's pretty easy, but pretty stubborn, so I want to do it all myself. So the front fenders I made, the sliders I made, the belly pan I made, the rear armor I made, the bumper. So
okay,
it's all me, and I'm slowly, because the Jeepster market is pretty small and not a lot of people offer stuff for it, so I'm slowly getting stuff on my website to offer for sale.
So you could have been a Scout guy, and now you're a Jeepster guy.
Could have been a Scout guy.
People are going to reach out to you for Jeepster stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. No, and I really like the rear bumper, how it wraps around, and you know, the rear fender openings on these from the factory were kind of small, but I like how you open that up. It looks great. And you kept like the stock lines, but then you know, more clearance and kept it low on 40s.
Yeah, and that's always the hard part is you got 40s, it's gonna be a big hole in the wheel well. There's no way around it, you gotta cut it. And actually, the factory inner wheel well, the front part of the tub is still stock. Aside from everything else that I cut out, I still left those, and then I continued my rear inner tubs for those.
Did you consider putting a CJ grill on it at any time?
Yeah, yes and no. I thought about it because if you notice the Jeepsters, the early ones, they're really short on the nose. So, and if you're trying to fit a V8 in there, like an LS that's in this one, space is a premium. It is almost impossible to fit everything. So if you go to a CJ grill, you can get a later hood, and it's actually like, I can't remember how long it is.
3 inches longer, yeah. So like early CJ5 versus late CJ5, when they start, they went from like the V6 engines and they started AMC bottom, and they put in like the inline sixes, they stretched that front end out 3 inches.
Yeah, and that would have been so much easier to fit the stuff. Like I have like the radiator and the fan is like so close to the water pump pulley, but I wanted to keep it with the Jeepster grill.
Sure, it's very distinctive.
Yeah, and it's like you don't see a lot of them, so a lot of people are like, what is that? I'm like, it's a Jeepster.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen some, and they run like the fiberglass hood with the fenders in them, and they look pretty slick, but it is, you're straying from that Jeepster look. It's definitely, I love that you have the hard top, still have the doors. It definitely has the look.
Yeah, it was very rusted. Most of the stuff was pretty rusted. The floorboards are all cut out. The top, I wasn't planning on running a top, and then we went to Hammers and it was raining, so I figured it's probably best to have a top, and so much rust came out of it while I was driving it. So.
Well, and probably folks in the Midwest are going to look at this and they're going to say,
yeah,
I think that's so much rust. But I mean, you built your own frame, so clearly it must have been pretty rusty.
Yeah, and it was more like I started cutting stuff out and I didn't want to patch a bunch of stuff. One thing led to the next. I had the angle grinder in my hand and I just started cutting the whole floor out. Yeah, but I had some people that were like, man, that floor was cherry. I would have loved to keep that. So, sorry.
Are there any things you want to change in the future? I know you kind of just got this thing done. You're shaking it down. I feel like with every new build, there's things that I would do differently, or I still want to upgrade. Are there things on your to-do list?
Yeah, definitely. There's a long list. Well, it's not that long, but mostly when I started laying everything out, I built the brakes based on stock cam LS.
Okay.
Halfway through, when I had the motor out, I decided let's put a Truck Norris cam in it, so it doesn't make very much vacuum, but I have the booster and everything, so I end up running like an electric pump, but it's not quite enough braking power when it's in low range. So definitely upgrade the brakes, the stock converter on the transmission, get rid of that, and then potentially a lower transfer case gears, like an Atlas or something.
So a lot of those go back to that cam and that decision. I find for me, you mentioned that this project took a few years. I'm really bad about, I'll have a certain budget or whatever, partway through I'm like, while we're here, and I'll make a change, and then there's sort of a domino effect and it impacts other things, right?
Yeah, that is exactly what happened. I was like, I'm gonna keep it stock junkyard motor. And I told that so many times, and then I bought the cam. So.
I get it. No, it's tempting. And the thing I think I love most about this thing is that it is mostly junkyard parts. You know, you have a bunch of time and labor into it. You're obviously, you know, having a laser, being an engineer, maybe a different skill set than the average person watching this video. But really, all in all, you know, if someone has the talent, the time, and the vision, it's not like you're running super exotic parts or super high dollar. You know, even I love that it has an MP241 and not an Atlas in it, because I mean, that's, you know, the drivetrain's basically junkyard parts, right? You put them into a smaller chassis and built your own suspension, and I think it's rad.
Yeah, that was definitely one of like my main goals when I was building this. Is I was like, I want to use junkyard parts. Like, yeah, sure, you could go buy all the motor, you know, the transmission built and stuff like that, but I was like, let's just see what we can build with junkyard stuff and try to keep it cheap so that, you know, like the everyday guy can go out and buy some of these parts and like put it in here. And like, while it might not be, yeah, your LS3 it would be so awesome to have that power, but you know what? It still gets down the road and still goes down the highway at like 90 miles an hour, so
nice.
Pretty epic.
Have you weighed it?
I haven't weighed it. That's on my to-do list.
Okay.
I imagine it weighs around 5,000 pounds if I had to take a guess at it.
Sure.
It might be less, but...
Did you weigh the step side?
Yeah, so the step side ended up weighing in at, with it empty, was like 6,000 pounds, so probably like 6,500 with full gear and everything like that loaded up for the con or something.
Okay. And what's it like we talked about the transmission, but what's it like wheeling this compared to wheeling your step side?
It's small.
Yeah.
Every time I can barely, like from my driver's seat, I can see the tire, whereas the Chevy I have to hang all the way out the door to kind of see the wheel.
And I recall you saying when we were wheeling the Chevy that when you take the doors off of it, you feel like you're cheating. So now with this, you probably feel like you're even more like you're cheating.
Oh yeah, it's just so small. Like when I'm wheeling it, you know, my wife will be in the passenger seat, and I'll just be driving around something, and she's like, "You have way more room over here," because I'm so used to like tucking through the rocks on the side.
And now I see the Yukon hubs in the front. Do you have what parts from them are you running, or what are you running for diffs and gears and stuff like that? Yeah,
so running 538 gears all the way around, Yukon gears, Yukon zip locker in the front, and a Yukon Grizzly in the rear.
So the Grizzly is an automatic locker, and the zip locker is selectable with air, right?
Yep, exactly. Okay. Yeah, and then Yukon hardcore hubs. So
nice. Stock shafts.
Stock shafts.
Junkyard parts.
So many people are like, you should put chromos. And I was like, well, let's break some stuff first and see what happens.
Sure. No, I think that's smart. And, you know, breaking an axle shaft is the end of the world. You go and that gives you the excuse to upgrade.
As long as it doesn't go too far, right? People are like, you're going to wipe the ball joints out and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
But, yeah, and it's, you know, when you're building a full rig, you know, everything adds up. You're like, cool, I need an extra $1,000 for shafts. I need $1,000 for this. And before long, it costs an absorbent amount of money.
Well, and so you mentioned swapping in this 5.3, and you know, you're building a rig from scratch. So what did you do in terms of plumbing, like the fuel system and wiring and things like that? Because for me, I feel like buying a junkyard Gen 3 engine is relatively inexpensive, but getting it to run is another story, right?
Yeah. Everybody says LS swaps are super easy, super cheap. They are. You can do it, but like fuel lines, you got to get the right ones. I ran brake lines are all AN lines, and instead of kind of routing it from the frame, they route all the way back to the links and then down the links to the axles. It just kind of keeps it all kind of contained, so it keeps it out of the way of getting caught in like coilovers or anything like that. And then fuel lines, if you're running higher pressure, you need the fuel injection fuel line, and that's not cheap. So it gets, and then AN lines, forget about it. It starts becoming very expensive very quickly.
And what about the wiring side of the house? What'd you use for that?
I ended up going with a painless universal. It's like a race car harness like that. Okay. Just because they had a lot of like relay and accessories already pre-wired into the relays. So I ran that. It was awesome. Like everything's labeled. Like I'm used to like old junkyard cars, and you're like, where does this go? And you're looking for
tracing wires.
The painless. You just look at it like, oh, all right, yeah, that's the horn. Okay, that's cool. Now I know exactly where it goes. And then for the engine management side, I ended up using a Holley Terminator, the Max X.
Oh.
And I cannot say enough good things about that. Like I was dead set on junkyard, like do the wiring harness and the LS computer and kind of like tune it myself. The Terminator kit made it so easy. Like barely wired anything up and got it running. And actually Funny story, when I first started it, I forgot to plug in the coil pack to the driver's side.
Okay.
So it ran on 4 cylinders with like half a key. It just turned right on. I was like, oh, okay.
Displacement on demand, right? You did it yourself.
Yeah, so yeah, it's one of those, like, you try to check to make sure oil is going through all the heads. So I pulled the valve. Yeah, anyway.
So Grant's done it again, building a super unique, capable rig with junkyard drivetrain components that didn't break the bank. The only question is, do you prefer his new Jeep or his old square body Chevy? Comment below and let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.